I think the new recession is not down. The new recession is up. And what I mean by that is when things get bad, the government says, nope, that can't be true. We can't have that. Turn the money printer on. And that new recession is the degradation of your purchasing power, and assets that are harder to produce than the dollar go up. Ergo, the new down is up when it comes to economic recession. Yo, 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 and welcome back to another episode of the Nyc and Griff Show. Today is Saturday, November 9th. It's 9:20 a.m. Griff, how are you today, sir?
Unburdened by what has been, to be unburdened, hopefully, by the future forever and ever and ever. Because I am so happy that somebody who comes from a middle-class family didn't get elected. And now it's time to watch the Donald. Let's see what he does. How are you doing?
Man, I'm doing really good. Like you said, Trump wins the 2024 presidential election. Now we've got some time before we get to Inauguration Day, right? So we're going to pray and hope that everything goes smooth according to plan. But Trump wins the 2024 election. Quick note for everybody, Oklahoma, my home state, is the only state where all counties voted red. So that's pretty cool. And where did the other 15 million votes go? Where did they go? And the answer is that they were never real in the first place. You go back and you look at 16, you look at the year before that, or election cycles before that, and you see a pretty steady increase in voters, right, as the population continues to grow. And in 2020, it goes like this. And then this year, it goes back down to following that normal schedule. So where did those other 15 million votes go, or whatever the exact number is? And I'm going to say that they're actually all fake. They were never real in the first place, which is the narrative. Most of these societal problems that we're talking about, that we hear about, they're all false narratives spun up by the elites. Dare we say that the intelligence agencies are propagandizing the people? And they're doing it for the nefarious purpose to distract the people from what's really happening. It's all false narratives. And there are two main problems in the world. The first one is that there is a spiritual war to push Jesus Christ out of the world. That's a huge issue. And the second problem is centrally controlled money, and that happens to be an output from the first problem. The first problem is causing all of these other problems. We don't need to go all the way down the Bitcoin rabbit hole to realize how bad centrally controlled money is for the world, and how many second, third, and fourth, fifth order consequences come from that, which is coming from the spiritual war of pushing Christ out of the world. Oh, in other news, the U.S. government is spending tons of money. The cost to service our national debt is now, I think it is officially number one on the line item for the federal budget. The data that I looked at was through September of this year. Listen to this, Griff. In fiscal year 2024, which the federal fiscal year is from the beginning of October to the end of September. So in fiscal year 2024, this year, the U.S. government spent $826 billion on defense, $268 billion on education, and $1.7 trillion on health and human services. The outlays just to pay the interest on our national public debt is $1.1 trillion. And then quick overview, fiscal year 2023, last year, we spent on a deficit $1.69 trillion. This year, fiscal year 2024, we spent on a deficit $1.83 trillion. And we know that that is a trend that has continued to happen over time. And guess what? Bitcoin hit a new all-time high. And what's really shocking about these Bitcoin all-time highs that are happening right now is how incredibly low these numbers are relative to the total addressable market for Bitcoin. Here before too long, we're going to be greater than 100,000. We're going to be in the six-figure range, and it's never going to go back down below that. Some interesting stuff to think about relative to the demand. We've got the ETF demand, MicroStrategy demand, and now the strategic Bitcoin reserve that Donald Trump has talked about. Cynthia Loomis is involved in. They've got all kinds of people behind this. We already know that with just the ETFs and MicroStrategy alone, they are buying up many multiples more than the annual, monthly, daily, whatever time frame we're looking at. they're buying many multiples more of the production of the network. And the biggest fact in that is that there's no other way for Bitcoin to show demand except for in the price. So now that we've got this strategic Bitcoin reserve coming into play here soon enough, man, very interesting to see where this thing's going to go, which is kind of why I'm thinking this thing's going to go to 100 grand and higher, and we're never going to look back. New news, BlackRock's Bitcoin ETF has now surpassed the gold ETF in net assets of fund. The inception date of this gold ETF is January 21st, 2005. And the inception date of the Bitcoin ETF is January 5th, 2024. So gold is sitting at $32 billion, $32.9 billion in net asset funds. And the Bitcoin ETF sits at $33.1 billion. So that's pretty cool. So we know now that the Bitcoin ETF has more assets under management in those funds than it does for gold. So that's pretty damn cool. And we've got more good news, Griff. Fair value accounting. It's the very end of December that it truly goes into effect. But currently, if an entity holds Bitcoin on their balance sheet, they're only able to account for the cost basis in acquiring it. And they have to mark down the value of that on their balance sheet if the price of Bitcoin goes down. But if the Bitcoin price goes up, they're not able to value that asset according to market value. Probably more so very beginning of 2025, that rule changes to where people will be able to mark the value of the Bitcoin they have on their balance sheet to whatever the market price is. And you might ask, Griff, why in the hell would somebody want to hold Bitcoin on their balance sheet? Well, it's because Bitcoin is locked in time and it's locked in physical real world work. Bitcoin is locked in time because of the difficulty adjustment in the halving cycle. No matter how much or how little computational energy is being directed into the Bitcoin network, the difficulty to mine the next block increases and decreases to regulate that a new block is mined or added to the blockchain in about 10 minutes. You run more miners to get more Bitcoin, the difficulty increases to prevent that and vice versa. So Bitcoin is locked in time. But not only is it locked in time, it's also locked in physical, real world work. I was talking with somebody yesterday and they were talking about, if I can't hold it in my hand, if I can't do this, then, I don't really know about it. It's like, well, okay, let's think about Bitcoin. Well, I'm making the statement here that Bitcoin is locked in physical, real world work. Bitcoin mining is simply just a computer that's running code and consuming electric energy. Electric energy is primarily produced by burning fossil fuels. Fossil fuels are begotten by extraction from the earth. Think of all the people, the trucks, the food, the water, the specialized equipment, all of these different things that go into producing all of these things, to managing those systems. Think about what it takes to run a power generation plant. Think about what it takes to manage and maintain the power grid. This is real world work that has to be done. This is real world infrastructure that Bitcoin needs. Now, we know that there's a ton of examples where people go out, they're kind of in a remote site. Maybe they're on an oil mining rig and they've got a Starlink satellite and they're able to work off of that, right? And that's great. But all of this real world infrastructure that Bitcoin needs, it requires real world work, and we're locked in time. That is what makes Bitcoin valuable. It's supply, issue, and schedule. Go check out the last episode we did with Wicked Smart Bitcoin. Really good. But after we dive all the way down into this, Griff, where in the hell do we stop? Corrupted money equals corrupted incentives. Corrupted incentives equal capital and resource misallocation. Capital and resource misallocation equals short-term profit seeking. Short-term profit seeking equals bad long-term outcomes. Seed oils, microplastics, fluoride in our water, processed food, political calamity. Griff, where in the hell do we go from here?
That was a lot to unpack. That was 10 minutes of Nick going off. I suppose after the election, being excited about the pump, Nick has been in Bitcoin now just even like a shade after me, I guess, at this point. And he hodled all the way down, and now it's exciting to see. I mean, like what we were at 15,000, now we're at 75,000. So even if you came in here pretty late to the game, so to speak, in some of the Bitcoiner worlds, you're up like 500% on some of your stacks, which it's hard for people probably in Bitcoin for a large amount of time to fathom what it's like to go through your first pump or your second pump, or maybe it's your first pump where you actually had some real savings in Bitcoin for the first time. and a meaningful impact takes place on your life when you get a 5x over a 2-year period. Let's not even talk about where Bitcoin could go. Let's just talk about what it's done for people right now. It was supposed to be dead. When I got into it, China banned the mining. I mean, it didn't look like anything was going to happen here. America had just lost an election. COVID was taking place. It was a pretty bleak time. And we started this podcast in a pretty dark time where nobody was really looking up Bitcoin, researching Bitcoin. It was the exact opposite. Everybody felt like they just got scammed by Bitcoin because there's 10,000 other cryptos that still exist somehow. I don't know if a Trump presidency gets rid of crypto. And I wouldn't even say that I advocate for getting rid of it. People will learn and they will be able to educate themselves over time here. But a guy like Nick, I can see why you would give a 10-minute monologue to start this podcast. I can see why you might be a little bit excited because are we right? Is sometimes life being about right and being wrong? Right and wrong is sometimes a thing that we have to really think about quite a bit. And Nick, does it feel good to be right? I guess is the better question to return back to you. Does it feel good to be right up to this point in time?
I feel like we're in a scary position. We could be in a scary position now. I think you and I are aware enough. We talk about this enough with each other that I think we've got a good guardrail in place just in each other. Man, lots of confirmation that what we have learned about, what we have been thinking, the worldview that we formed has been correct. I think there's a lot of good and excitement in that, right? Because if it is true, if the worldview and the thoughts and approaches to life that we do have, that we've talked about, are correct, and we continue on those things, then the path seems to be just like Bitcoin, an exponential increase, right? But I think it's also scary, though, because it's a prideful trap. You know, it would be really easy for us to say, haha, point the finger, have fun staying poor, you're dumb, right? That's not the right approach, and that's not the approach that we take. But, man, sometimes it's really hard to not be that way, especially whenever everybody looks at you and says, haha, you're dumb, right? They say the same thing back to you. And then after you get into it and you realize what's going on under the hood, now that we're coming back out of that, right? We bought so much Bitcoin at 15, 16,000, and now we're sitting at 76, 75, 77, and nobody's talking about this. And then you see all of these things we just talked about, the ETF demand, MicroStrategy, the strategic Bitcoin reserve, the government continuing to spend on extreme deficits. We only know where this goes, and that is all other assets going up. This is something I was telling you the other day, Griff. I think the new recession is not down. The new recession is up. And what I mean by that is when things get bad, the government says, nope, that can't be true. We can't have that. Turn the money printer on. And that new recession is the degradation of your purchasing power, and assets that are harder to produce than the dollar go up. Ergo, the new down is up when it comes to economic recession.
Yeah, let's give this a little bit more real world context. Nick, do you think Oklahoma is completely red because of RFK or because of Trump? Because your state is not healthy, my friend. The life expectancy in Oklahoma is far too low. Do you think you guys are getting into it for the health side of things, Maha, or is that a MAGA state?
I think it's a MAGA state. I think it's drain the swamp type of stuff. You know, I think that a lot of the people that I talk with more in depth on these things here in Oklahoma, I think the health aspect is really big for a lot of folks. But I think a lot of Oklahoma is definitely the Make America Great, freedoms, liberties. That 3-minute clip from Trump that I sent you the other day, where he's talking about this is basically his plan. This is his plan that he wasn't really able to enact in his first term because he's kind of figuring things out, right? And I think Dave Smith has a really good piece on this, Griff, if you've seen that. But this time around, man, the dude's got Elon. He's got RFK. He's got Vivek. He's got who else? Isn't Ron Paul now on his deal? He's got Dana White. He's got all these people that are behind him that know much better what's going on. He's been there, done that now. And I think he's actually going to implement a lot of these things. And I think we're already seeing good positive changes. I don't know if you saw that the EU – is the EU or somebody over there?
The amount of Trump effect. The EU wants to buy oil from us. Hamas is calling for a ceasefire. Putin is saying he wants to meet with them. Xi Jinping in China is talking more about his Bitcoin purchase than they are talking about going to war. Putin has come out and said that he thinks the people in the West are good people. He was kind of happy to see what happened with Trump. He thinks he's a leader after what happened with him getting shot. Yeah, there's a lot of reasons to be excited, right? There's a lot of reasons to go on the red pill and on the red wave. And there's a lot of reasons to, really laugh at the tears on the liberal front. I think the cool part, though, about Bitcoiners is that we're not, we might gloat a little bit, or we might find humor in the liberal tears and things like that, because we know what they're saying really isn't true. And it really is more sad than anything that they feel propagated and so divided from the rest of us. It's sad. It's not something to really gloat about, but it is funny. I mean, I'm a part-time comedian, so I think it's really funny. I also think it's sad. I think it's really sad because Bitcoiners' job now over the next 4 years is to hold Trump to account, because we don't really care. I mean, that's the whole ethos of this game. The game of Bitcoin is small government, moderated government, and Bitcoin maybe helping the dollar, or maybe Bitcoin overtaking what that even means. And I think Bitcoiners have done it the best over the last 4 years. Yeah, we care about who is sitting as president, but we more so care about the fiscal policy and what's happening behind the scenes. And a lot of Bitcoiners' attitude really could be summed up like this. I mean, like, Trump getting shot was pretty inspiring, but I felt like this speech from Elon Musk was actually...
There was all the criticism. There was advertisers leaving. We talked to Bob Iger today.
I hope they stop.
You hope?
Don't advertise.
You don't want them to advertise?
No.
What do you mean?
If somebody's going to try to blackmail me with advertising, blackmail me with money, go f yourself.
And that's Bitcoiners for you. I mean, people can say that Elon Musk isn't a Bitcoiner. People can say that Elon Musk is whatever. At the end of the day, he is a Bitcoiner. The guy was tired of the major news media outlets lying. He was tired of the vaccines. He's tired of the big government. He's tired of the regulation. He wants the specialization of products. He may use global supply chain a little bit too much to his advantage to be a Bitcoiner for me. But at the end of the day, the guy calls for no subsidies to EVs, and he's the one who sells all the EVs. He doesn't want anybody's help. He thinks he can build it without your help. He just wants a fair opportunity to compete. And when he said, go fuck yourself, I felt like that was maybe one of the major movements over even the last 4 years, where you can tell that he started to get a little bit upset, and Trump has changed the party lines. I don't think it's uncool to be a Republican anymore. I think it's actually cool to be a Republican, because the Republican Party has now turned into the party of the people. And if you see Donald Trump veering off, I think that there are going to be enough people that want to call him out. But at the end of the day, he also has people like Vivek, who I think here's another example of where this country is going. And it was him calling out the RNC, saying that we're a bunch of losers, saying that we haven't won anything.
We've become a party of losers at the end of the day. It was a cancer to the Republican establishment. Let's speak the truth. I mean, since Ronna McDaniel took over as chairwoman of the RNC in 2017, we have lost 2018, 2020, 2022, no red wave that never came. We got trounced last night in 2023. And I think that we have to have accountability in our party. For that matter, Ron, if you want to come on stage tonight, you want to look the GOP voters in the eye and tell them you resign, I will yield my time to you. And frankly, look, the people there cheering for losing in the Republican Party. Think about who's moderating this debate. This should be Tucker Carlson, Joe Rogan, and Elon Musk. We'd have 10 times the viewership, asking questions that GOP primary voters actually care about, and bringing more people into our party.
And again, that's another guy like just couldn't be saying it better. You have Jerome Powell now coming out and saying this. I mean, it's ridiculous. I think that everybody sees it's ridiculous within this party, and this is what we're talking about.
Some of the president-elect's advisors have suggested that you should resign. If he asked you to leave, would you go?
No.
Can you follow up on, do you think that legally you're not required to leave?
No.
Do you believe that the president has the power to fire or demote you, and has the Fed determined the legality of a president demoting at will any of the other governors with leadership positions?
Not permitted under the law.
He can go fuck himself. At the end of the day, Bitcoin is going to give this Trump administration an opportunity to get out from under only using treasuries as a way to get more money out of taxing the people. He's doing things with tariffs, like you were talking about, second, third, fourth, fifth order consequences. Tariffs. Listen, guys, the government needs to get rid of this debt, or they need to be able to manage it. And buying Bitcoin might be one solution, but they also need to start recruiting revenue from other sources other than taxing people who don't have any money. Americans don't have any money. When they keep lowering these interest rates from the Fed, like the base rate to go borrow money, every market in the world is saying, go fuck yourself. They're saying that you've lost control. They're saying that we don't believe you. They're saying that the government's going to need to borrow money. And at the end of the day, you guys are colluding with one half of this government, or you are colluding with a uniparty. We're saying that the Federal Reserve never should have been a thing. The 16th Amendment should never have been established. It's time to abolish the Fed. It's time to abolish the 16th Amendment. And I don't know if Trump has that in mind, but I can tell you a lot of the people that support him know that. Whether it might be a Dave Smith who came out and supported him, or a Joe Rogan, who is basically a Dave Smith guy because that's where he gets a lot of his politics from, or a Ron Paul, which is the one who started a lot of it, which is where Dave Smith gives all his credit. Ron Paul ran on ending the Fed. Now he's back. You're talking about Doge, the Department of Government Efficiency. I hope Dogecoin goes to the moon. You know why? Who cares? That means people are kind of getting it. They're kind of saying, oh, we don't need the Fed. We don't need the banks. And I had a funny conversation, Nick. Do you have a bank account? Because I had a friend talking to me and I was like, dude, I haven't had a bank account for years. I have a debit card on Fold, but I don't really have a bank account. I don't really like survive on the existing financial system. I don't participate in the housing market right now. I don't participate in a 401k. I don't participate in government subsidies. I don't want their handouts. I don't want their money. I don't want their rules. I don't want their regulation. I don't want to be a part of it. I more or less almost didn't vote in this election because I don't believe in the system. And Donald Trump and everybody that came a part of it give me hope in the sense that we're not going to be playing this same game anymore. The American dream can come back. And I can't stand guys like Jerome Powell. I can't stand people like Kamala Harris or Hillary Clinton or Bill Clinton or Barack Obama. Barack Obama ran in 2008 on being the anti-war president and then proceeded to drop more bombs than any president in American history, only to then have the support of Liz Cheney later on for his president-elect or his little puppet that he wanted to have in office like he did in 2020. The DNC is ran by elitist, globalist assholes. They're terrible people. And I'm not saying that the Republican Party is perfect. It's not. But Donald Trump does not represent the Republican Party. And I think that this time around, we have a much better shot with him actually getting rid of the deep state than he did before, whether that's because we have the House, the Senate, the Supreme Court, whether that's we have the popular vote and a lot of people supporting it, or whether it's just a matter of fact that his daughter-in-law is the chair of the RNC. She got voted into there. It's a new party. It's a party for women. It's a party for people. It's a party for people to make money. It's a party for people to support deregulation. And honestly, it's a party of honest workers. It's a party of people that are like, hey, tariffs and some of these things, you know, there might be a little short-term turmoil, but we need a little short-term turmoil, guys. We can't have everything continue to melt up because that's exactly what the dollar is doing. It's melting up. And Bitcoin can support that. But what I would argue is that Bitcoin doesn't necessarily help that. Bitcoin's going to go up no matter what. So if they want to melt up, Bitcoin's going to go up. If they want to get some fiscal responsibility cooking here in the United States, Bitcoin's going to melt up. Bitcoin's going up because Bitcoin is worth more than anything else in the world. It's the best money we've ever seen. And you shouldn't be putting your money in illiquid assets and hoping that that's going to have some positive cash flow for you to live off of. We don't need a country of landlords. We need a country of small business owners. We don't need a country of Airbnb owners. We need a country of farmers. That's what we need. We need people to get back to traditional values in a sense that you don't need a $60,000 education to be a social studies teacher. That's stupid. It doesn't make any sense. And I'm not sure if Trump represents everything that I'm saying, but the direction he's headed in, I'm pretty confident in. And after watching some of those videos, those are some of the guys that support him. And those are some of the most powerful speeches, powerful movements, powerful videos that I can remember over at least the last year. And you know, these elections, especially when you have a 3-month campaign from the other side, a Manchurian candidate like Kamala Harris was, one that really it looked like she staged a coup against her own party. You don't have a lot of time to digest information. And for Elon and all these guys and Vivek to come out at the right time, which means the last 12 months, when the stakes are the highest, to put themselves on the line. Even the Joe Rogan coming out 8 years late, maybe, to a lot of people. He still came out here to support it. And it's exciting because I know a lot of the liberal people who aren't talking to people who are crying on social media over time here, if they're willing to listen at all, they're probably going to become Republicans. And in 2028, you're probably going to see even a bigger red wave because a lot of the things Trump's talking about are holistically fantastic for the economy, for the country. What he says versus what he does are two different things. And if abortion is the issue that you want to talk about and the issue that you want to vote on, listen to me. You want the power in the states, because I promise you, even in Florida, where it seems strict, and it is strict, it's 6 weeks, Governor DeSantis is not going to be able to sit there for forever if he doesn't actually come around on the issue and starts providing sensible legislation. States and the United States government is not going to tolerate people who need an abortion go back to their home state and they get prosecuted in their home state. You guys need to understand that not everything happens in a day, and some of the legislation and things that Donald Trump are talking about actually are a fairly low time preference activity. I don't know if you'd agree with that, Nick, but I think a lot of the things that Trump is talking about, unfortunately, they're not actually as quick hitters as he would like to think. Maybe the energy sector is, and that might be the only one. Maybe the peace front with war and being more isolationist is a big help to the economy initially. But a lot of the things that he's talking about proposing are dismantling the government, and a lot of those are low time preference plays. We're not going to see the benefits of them until the 3rd or 4th year of his presidency. We might see them off the rip, but he's putting in a lot of things that I think are low time preference. That's what's exciting, is it not? Man, it's exciting.
I totally agree with the low time preference stuff. I mean, and what you're talking about, right, with RFK, with all the health stuff, with Elon Musk, with the government efficiency. What is it? It's DOGE. What does it stand for?
Department of Government Efficiency.
Yeah. So all of those things, right? It is very low time preference stuff. And it's funny, going back to the clip that you pulled up of Jerome Powell, I was just kind of curious. He's like, nope, it's not legal. Can't do that, right? Which I think is a reflection of, and dare we say that Jerome Powell is now playing Kamala's playbook. Here's a couple of thoughts that I wrote on Twitter the other day. The Harris campaign was a joke from the beginning. The Harris campaign got significantly worse over time. The Harris campaign catered to the selfish and entitled. Trump did interviews, Kamala did not. Trump answered questions, Kamala did not. Trump was and is genuine, Kamala is not. The legacy media is bought and paid for. Independent media will soon replace legacy media, and common sense thinking outweighs the lengthy babbling. And so I'm like, this is what's funny to me is it seems like a lot of folks on the left, they hear these talking points. For example, Jerome Powell gets on there and they're like, hey, the president talked about, he's going to boot you out of here. And he's like, no, can't do that. It's not legal. And somebody hears that and they say, oh, well, that's what Jerome Powell said. That must be true. Well, if you just get on ChatGPT and you ask the question, is the U.S. president able to fire the head of the SEC? And the response that it pumps out here, it says, yes, the U.S. president has the authority to remove the head of the Securities and Exchange Commission. Again, what's really deceptive, I think, is something we talked about a second ago. The new down is up in terms of economic recession. And just like the deception of inflation, right? People say inflation is prices going up, when in reality, that is deceptive. What is actually happening is the purchasing power of the dollar is going down. Prices aren't going up. The purchasing power of the dollar is going down. And I think that these folks are using all of these false narratives, again, to go back, using all these false narratives, spinning it all up, going through this election cycle. I couldn't help but feel conflicted on who in the hell to even believe. All of this, oh, she said this, that's a lie. He said that, that's a lie. Everybody was pointing fingers at each other, saying everything that they were saying was a lie. And I think for a lot of normal people that weren't willing to dig in and kind of do a couple of ChatGPT searches and Google around and read some articles and try to figure something out, they look at whoever they support, whatever they say, that's just fact. And we know that that's obviously not true. And what's kind of scary is that, a lot of people just didn't really care to do extra work. And I think what's really good, though, is that just like Bitcoin, right? We talk about Bitcoin. Hey, if you guys don't believe in it, you don't want to buy Bitcoin, you don't think that it's a store of value, that's okay. Great. More for us. The only issue is that there are consequences for not adopting or adopting certain things.
Let's not get too far ahead of ourselves now, Nick. Okay, who knows if we're right? And the only thing I want to touch on the political thing before I move it to my idea for our next segment here, the neocons and the Democratic Party and the globalists, they're not done fighting. Okay, I mean, it looks a little peaceful now. I would say that the most important thing for our country is probably to protect Donald Trump, make sure he stays alive. But they're not done fighting, guys. It's not going to be some peaceful transfer of power. It's going to be a very sophisticated, non-peaceful transfer of power. But Nick, let's move it on to our next game that I want to kick off with another little video. What makes you bullish about why are we directionally correct here? Let's see how many things that we can alternate here and rattle off about why we think Bitcoin is headed in the right direction and why we think the price is going up. How bullish can we get? How long can we go where we can just alternate different talking points, different articles that points to the fact that Bitcoin, not only is it going up, but a lot of things are taking place that Bitcoiners have been talking about for a while. Here, I'll go with one.
Ultimately, my promise to each and every one of you is this: I will be the pro-innovation and pro-Bitcoin president that America needs and our citizens deserve. This will be one industry, but this will be a thriving industry, a great industry, and I'm going to be doing the same thing for every other industry also. Our nation has never thrived by trying to censor new ideas and shut down the dreams of our people. America always plants our flag on the next frontier and pushes boldly ahead. We have to do that. We haven't been doing that for a long time, especially the last 3.5 years. It's gone the exact opposite. Those of you in this room inherit the legacy of generations of American pioneers and patriots, risk takers and renegades who settled this continent, built the modern world, and lived on the bleeding edge. You live on a bleeding edge. You do know that, Bitcoiners, don't you? You are the modern day Edisons and Wright brothers and Carnegies and Henry Fords, and what you do in your lifetime stands a chance to outlive us all and inspire humanity for generations to come.
There's one thing. That's the president of the United States, the president of the United States, the commander-in-chief in 2024, whose uncle is also a famous scientist who back in the day worked with Nikola Tesla. Like, his family has been in this country for a long time. He is a lot smarter than people give him credit for because of the way that he runs his campaigns and the way that he likes to speak in his speeches and his talks. The guy is way smarter than people want to give him credit for. He likes to call himself a genius. Here, I'll co-sign it. The guy's a genius. Donald Trump is a genius. The guy knows more than we like to give him credit for. He's much smarter than we like to give him credit for, just because he's a little funny in the way that he talks and how he goes after people and gives people nicknames. He is the best politician of our lifetime. Not even close. Not even close. The best politician of our lifetime. And he is much smarter than people want to give him credit. But there's one, Nick. President of the United States thinks that Bitcoiners are really the new builders of the Industrial Revolution and everything that matters in America. What do you got for me? What's next?
You know, I feel like I'm a broken record on this topic. We, Griff, love to talk about the philosophical or societal impacts and concepts around Bitcoin, right? Love those things. But I think it's inherently difficult to get into some of those topics and understand how they work, how these things actually happen if we don't have an understanding of what's happening underneath the hood. We think about the supply issuance schedule of Bitcoin being locked in time, being locked in real physical work through the difficulty adjustment, through the halving cycle, right? We think about the Bitcoin ledger is a distributed ledger. It's globally distributed. The entirety of the Bitcoin network in all of its transactions in history are all kept in individual nodes, right? Individual computers that hold the entire history. And these nodes are distributed globally all around the world. The same is true for the mining side of things, right? And then we start thinking about what is money. Money is the application of our time and our skilled labor in the economy. Money is a store of value, medium of exchange, and unit of account. It's not a currency. Money and currency are different. A currency is a medium of exchange and unit of account. Fiat is currency. Fiat is not money. Just bullish thoughts, dude. I mean, look at the demand that the ETFs are driving. Look at the demand that MicroStrategy is driving. Look at the demand that we're about to see from the strategic.
See, that's what I'm saying. You just rattled off like 3 of them. That's why I was saying give me one. But here, since you gave me 3, let's go into another one. See, that's what I'm saying. Watch this one. This is the CCP's TV.
Bitcoin price surges to record high, data shows, calculated by market data. The largest cryptocurrency, Bitcoin trading price on the 6th day at one point reached 75,000, record new high, increase of over 8%. According to multiple media, Trump has previously promised to make Bitcoin cryptocurrency capital and establish a strategic Bitcoin reserve on the same day. Yeah.
So China is aware that Donald Trump is president and Donald Trump wants to start a strategic national reserve for Bitcoin. That's pretty bullish. That would have sounded crazy to people when I got into Bitcoin back in 2020 when China banned mining, because I got in before that. And when they banned mining, I mean, the amount of headlines and haters and blah, 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 that said the game theory isn't going to work. Well, now we have a president who, if he's held to account in any way, shape, or form, and Bitcoin being an out against the Fed, right? I would say even Jerome Powell saying, no, he can't fire me. That's bullish for Bitcoin. You're going to tell a pro-Bitcoin president that he can't do anything about the Fed? Let's see how that works out for you. But even better yet, MicroStrategy bullish, Trump bullish. And now China's like, yeah, we can't just let him get all the Bitcoin. You got anything else for me, Nick?
Was it Dubai that removed capital gains taxes on Bitcoin? I think that's coming soon to the United States. I think that's going to be huge. But I think another one that's really, really big is the fair value accounting piece that we talked about a little earlier. You know, what's strange is all of these big banks, they are wanting to custody Bitcoin for their own people. Right now, with the fair value accounting stuff, they're practically unable to do that, right? And that fair value accounting change is going to be huge. It's going to enable people to actually hold Bitcoin on their balance sheet and account for that value relative to the market price of those things. Banks and really entities, just legal entities at all, will be able to custody Bitcoin and account for that value according to the market value on the balance sheet. That's huge, which is only going to drive more demand.
Well, and also to speak to it, you're getting to recognize Bitcoin holdings as earnings, which means it's getting treated more as money. And I would say one of the things that everybody in Bitcoin that has been ahead of the game on inflation, we've been just as ahead on the game theory and the fact that the United States can't play around for too long. There's no way that they can play around for too long. And I think that with a Republican House, Senate, President, and court, you have an opportunity to get something like this passed, potentially, a Bitcoin Act of 2024, in which the United States government wants to acquire 1 million Bitcoin over a 5-year period. Senator Loomis over in Wyoming proposed it. This is not a government cuck podcast. We're not really looking for the government to take all the Bitcoin. But I tell you what, everybody, if you think MicroStrategy is a lot and it getting added to balance sheets and it becoming a treasury asset for corporations is a big deal, think about if the United States wants to turn on the money printer and go get a little bit of money to go buy some Bitcoin. That sounds pretty bullish to me. That sounds pretty good. That sounds pretty good for the United States. That sounds like we want to win. And the United States likes to win new technology. It likes to win games. And with the fair value accounting, it just sounds like Bitcoin's treated more as money. It sounds like it's just money, right? Should there be taxes on Bitcoin? Should there be? I don't know. Is that bullish for Bitcoin, Nick? The potential for there to be no taxes on Bitcoin? Does it seem to you like almost everything that since we've gotten into Bitcoin, it does seem like it's going to happen because it has to happen? And I would say the next thing for Bitcoiners to be really excited about isn't really about who's going to acquire it. It's about the fact that with fair value accounting, the city of Detroit is taking tax revenue in Bitcoin. They're not going to be able to tax your Bitcoin like a capital gain anymore. Maybe they can treat it as ordinary income in potentially if you just want to make it. But Bitcoin is money. It is legal tender. You can use it, and you should be able to use it without having to pay a capital gain every single time you move it. Now, I know the president has said that, but it seems like we're getting there. I don't know what you would say. Do you think that we're kind of getting to the point where Bitcoin is just money, even in the United States?
I mean, yeah, it seems like we're definitely heading that direction. It's, I think I was listening to a podcast earlier this week, and they were talking about how we will look back on 2024 and see what large of an impact that this year really has had. Think about just all the regulatory clarity, right? We get an ETF issuance, right? That is now trading, that has been trading and has shattered records. Just the Bitcoin ETF has shattered records. Okay, we've got regulatory clarity there, right? And now it's not just like regular retail folks that are, got a little extra money in their 401k that they're willing to allocate to this IBIT, Bitcoin ETF. We're talking about large institutions that are driving demand on these things that have their own customers that want this. So that's huge. We've got the fair value accounting change. MicroStrategy is doing everything that they're doing. I just recently listened to an interview with the ex-CEO of Sotheby's, and I listened to an interview with him, and he was talking about it. Man, it's like you've got all of these big names that are in business that are coming to realize what Bitcoin is, and it's based on the properties of what Bitcoin is, right? People always talk about gold. Well, why is gold valuable? Gold is valuable not because it's shiny, not because you can hold it in your hand, but because of its properties, because of its scarcity, because of its difficulty to produce. And just so happens that Bitcoin takes all of those properties that make gold great, and it exponentially increases their efficiency. The only thing that Bitcoin does not have that gold does is a very long track record. But the reason that gold has a very long track record is because of its properties.
Yeah, and also let's just keep getting bullish. Nayib Bukele, a real Bitcoin dictator, actually, I believe he is in El Salvador, spoke with the real Donald Trump, made a tweet about it because Twitter is where news happens. And they had an interesting conversation about his podcast strategy, the bullet that nearly killed him, the incredible people around him, the sometimes harmful effects of U.S. aid funds, Soros-backed NGOs, and our shared commitment to the challenges ahead. And I think I highlighted the sometimes harmful effects of U.S. aid funds. What do you think they're talking about when it relates to money? We're talking about really, really smart people that run the world, not Nyc and Griff. Nyc and Griff are small fish in a very large pond. We're not even fish. We're like microscopic tadpoles that haven't become frogs yet. But Nayib Bukele is talking to the president-elect of the United States, and he is going, hey, you know, sometimes when you guys just decide to like do things with your money and you guys decide to print money and, you know, put it in Haiti and maybe go to these other countries, it doesn't actually turn out to be so good. Really, it just gives the IMF leverage to kind of blow us up and put us into debt forever. And all these countries really are in debt slavery because of the United States and what our monetary policy has been for over 100 years. I mean, the Federal Reserve getting established and the United States becoming the world reserve currency, especially with Bretton Woods back in the 1940s. But then when we get off the gold standards in 71 and default on our debt and just go on to basically a central banking standard, a debt standard, debt became money in the 70s. Nayib Bukele is going, hey, Donald, you know some of those things are crazy. That's why I had to legalize Bitcoin, right? And he's going, oh, I know why you had to legalize Bitcoin. I get it. It's fair. You can do that. We're just going to buy way more than you. And he's like, well, you guys are the United States. You guys can buy more Bitcoin, but stop empowering these banks to give out loans that are impoverishing countries like mine. That conversation, in my opinion, is taking place because we're talking about smart people talking about Bitcoin. We're talking about world leaders talking about Bitcoin. And I have been in it long enough to say now that was not even in the scope of what people thought was imaginable unless you were talking to Nyc and Griff 2 years ago or on Bitcoin Twitter or listening to some more prominent podcasts or speakers about Bitcoin and what it meant or listening to Michael Saylor. That was crazy. That was crazy. Now it's a thing. Now it's just a thing. And the scary part, I think, for people when they look at it, like we were talking about, is that we are fiscally extremely unhealthy. The Treasury market, whether Donald gets in there or not, or tariffs or not, that's $36 trillion of debt with an interest payment that is melting up so fast, there's almost nothing we can do about it. They're lowering rates, and the Treasury market is kind of responding well this time, but not that well, and the housing market's totally rejecting it. And so I think that Donald, along with a lot of these other smart people that he's putting in his camp, know some of these things as well. Bitcoiners on Twitter aren't the only ones that know them, although it might have helped for us to be shouting it for the last 3 years on the guy's platform who is pretty much the number 2 in the United States. There's a vice president named JD Vance, but there's a guy, Elon Musk, who got this done. Elon Musk got it done.
These are long time horizon activities, right? Low time preference. And, you know, to your point earlier, we were talking about, you know, are these, we can't, you know, if we're going to go in day one, we're just going to abolish the Federal Reserve and cut all of these federal departments. Well, that's probably going to be a little difficult, right? We've got to there's got to be some steps, right? We can't just go in haphazardly with an axe and start cutting things. I think we probably could, but I think what's probably a better strategy is let's think about this a little bit. How can we best and most efficiently do this so as to cause at least amount of problems? Now, obviously going to be a lot of issues when we talk about some of those huge changes. There's going to be a lot of pushback because do you know who the largest employer in the United States is?
Walmart?
The federal government. And so literally, right, the largest employer, it seemingly is going to be cutting tons and tons and tons of employees. And that's bullish. That's very bullish. But I think that there's got to be baby steps for that to happen, right? And I guess the better example could be if I'm a drug addict, you know, and I just immediately cold turkey stop, we could probably argue that that's good, right? That's probably good. That's going to be really disorienting. That's going to be really hard for a lot of people that are reliant on that. And so, hey, we could acknowledge and say that it's a good goal to get rid of these things, to be more efficient in what the government really does need to be involved in and axing the things that they don't need to be involved in. But I think you and I would agree that there's probably a good strategy in doing that, and there's probably a bad strategy in doing that.
Well, I
if
would
we
even
go in and we just cut all these people and we say, get out of here, go home, that's maybe not the best approach.
Well, I would even take it a step further. I'm pretty sure a heroin addict, if he has no medical attention and then just stops cold turkey, can potentially die. And that's the same thing that could happen to our country. If they make some wrong moves here, they could end up causing a recession or a Great Depression like we've never seen before. I would just argue that that is still bullish. There's no politician, there's nobody here to save us. Donald Trump and the things that he's trying to do, I co-sign a lot of it. I do. But I just harp on the fact that I think that everything he does is not going to be fantastic, because this is going to be a really difficult game for him to play over the next 4 years. But just to continue on smart people talking bullishly about Bitcoin, because I think Trump is great, but he can't be the only one, because at the end of the day, he's not our savior, and he's not just going to do everything that Bitcoiners want him to do. He makes a lot of promises on a campaign trail, and we got to hope that he does a lot of those things. But there's also going to be a lot of pushback because a lot of people hate him. I'm pretty sure I live in a state where Newsom just passed legislation to counteract what Trump might potentially do. And people in the state are like, yeah, that's good. So be careful about how much, you associate or you just want Donald Trump to save everything, because he's not out of the woods yet. He's got a lot to fight. But how about the All In podcast talking about Bitcoin?
Kind of buyer of last resort. And if they end up buying treasuries, that's where we have a problem with too many dollars and inflation kicking up. And so it feels like a lot of the trades in assets are what's going to benefit from the inflation. And it's going to be gold, it's going to be Bitcoin. And in some cases, because you're pumping more money in the system, it's going to be equities. And that might explain why equities are moving up as well. Where do you guys invest here? I mean, Chamath, do you care about how the market's positioned or how you're positioned in this election right now, and based on how we're seeing markets trade and what these kind of macro indicators are telling us? Or are you just business as usual, heads down, invest and build as you always have?
Yeah, I think that you can't trade these things. And any attempt to do it is probably a level of false precision where you're going to lose more money. And there's a lot of slippage in even just trying to execute it. I mean, at the beginning of the year, I said the breakout asset was going to be Bitcoin. I think it looks like it's going to be the resounding inflation hedge asset for the next 50 or 100 years.
A lot of smart people, even outside of Donald Trump, a lot of smart people. Guys, I know there's more plebes listening to this than anything, and I'm sure everybody might even have more Bitcoin than even Nick than I do that actually listen to this podcast. But for those that don't really have Bitcoin yet or are still getting into it, you don't need to tie everything up just in the Trump, just in the world leaders and things like that, because the private world wants Bitcoin too.
Griff, I've got another one here for you that I think is really good. Listen to this real quick.
I can sell you a $20 million painting, but I can't tell you why a piece of code is money. That's an interesting paradox. So that was the journey. And so I dove deep and began to question what is money exactly? I thought it was currency. I was wrong. And then what creates value? Why do things have value? What is it about us that ascribes value to things? And then I literally went down a rabbit hole. And it's actually not too far off what Michael Saylor or some of these people talk about, do 100 to 1,000 hours on it. And you really dive into podcasts and dive into the books and ask yourself, go on an intellectual journey about what does all this stuff mean and why is it important? And then there's startling insights that I have now at age 59 that I didn't have at age 57 that came from this journey. You want an example? Mm-hmm. I didn't realize that if the average year, the money printer goes, call it 8 to 10%, even in the Western countries, even in the OECD nations, and the average return on the S&P 500 is, call it 9-ish%, including dividends, maybe 9.7, maybe a little less. Mm-hmm. that it means that all of the work of the S&P 500, all of the value created there is actually the money printer.
I mean, we don't really need to go much further than that, Griff. I mean, holy shit. The value of these assets going up at the same rate that the money printer's going burr, strange, interesting. And this is not just some regular dude like you and I. This dude has like been around the block. He's a high level person. He's been in high level positions in several boards and several large companies, and he's having these insights. Something that he mentioned earlier in that clip was that he was, and I listened to the full episode, and he kind of expands on it a little bit more. He talked about how from a traditional finance perspective, it's really difficult to kind of understand, how do we value Bitcoin? What is its value? How do we price it, right? And he talked about, instead of approaching it from a perspective of traditional finance, he had to go down another layer deeper and ask the question, well, how do we value anything? How do we attribute value to anything? And then is when you start getting into that question that he mentions, what is money? How does this thing actually work? What are the properties that make something valuable? And I think that's a very interesting thought, right? Because a lot of people look at Bitcoin and they say, oh, it's X amount price. Well, this stock did this, or gold did that. And it's like, okay, well, hold on a minute. If we're going to compare apples to oranges, well, we probably should go a little layer deeper and figure out and ask the questions of, how do we value anything? Regardless if it's a pencil or if it's Bitcoin or if it's a bottle of water, how do we value things? And I think he talked about, I've got insights now at 59 that I didn't have at 57.
And Bitcoin is for everybody. I think for anybody listening that hasn't read it yet, I think he read the Bitcoin Standard and he was like, oh, that makes sense. And I think I'm harping on the Bitcoin is for everybody thing, because you don't have to be some genius to understand that your savings account, your money, shouldn't be able to get debased by a government. Money is a technology, not a consumer good. I think that's a concept that a lot of people can get behind, because money is a technology. Money is supposed to gain purchasing power. Money is supposed to be something that is valuable, not debt. And just to continue on the train, because you don't have to be a genius to think some of these things we're talking about that make us bullish for Bitcoin. This is turning into a great segment. It's just turning into like how many different things have happened over the last 6 months that are bullish for Bitcoin. Everything has been bullish for Bitcoin for a while. You have to stop looking at the price all the time. Why does everybody take an untraditional look at a very traditional asset, a very traditional way of thinking, a savings account over an investing account? Why do people not DCA into Bitcoin? Why do they spot buy it when it's going from 69 to 40 to 15, then it gets back up to 45, and they go, oh, I just got positive on my Bitcoin. Maybe I'll buy more now. I go, why didn't you dollar cost average into it the whole time? I don't understand why you would even go into Bitcoin without the idea that you need to maybe buy a chunk at a time. It's dangerous to buy Bitcoin if that money matters to you in any short or midterm time preference. If that money matters to you you can't buy Bitcoin and just put it away for 10 years and not think about it. If that money is more important to you than that, I wouldn't get into Bitcoin. You need to be able to buy a little bit at a time, and you need to hold it for a long period of time. But what else is bullish for Bitcoin? Oh, Russia's sovereign wealth fund is investing in Bitcoin mining infrastructure throughout BRICS nations, with the idea of setting global trade in Bitcoin. Van Eck's head of digital assets. That's another smart guy talking about Bitcoin. You want to see some other smart people talking about Bitcoin? BlackRock. 85% allocation to Bitcoin in a paper they released before their ETF went out, where they said that you should probably have about your entire portfolio should probably be 85% allocated to Bitcoin, and then maybe some equities and things like that on top of it. These are real statements that are coming out, and Bitcoiners are the only ones that really care or have been talking about them, which just speaks to the fact that, Warren Buffett always said, if you had a punch card with like 20 punches, how many investments would you really make? And Bitcoiners might up that and go, you got 5 investments. How many would you really make? Because just being in the Bitcoin ethos for the last 4 years, the amount of little nuggets all over the place that if you piece them together, you go, oh, I don't care what the price is. The price going way up. Price going way up over time. We're talking 1,000x, 2,000x, 3,000x. It's got so many percentage points up to go that I'm not really worried. I'm just going to buy as much as I can. Okay. I'm not really sure what else I'm going to invest in, because if that's not going to be enough money, I don't really know what I'm supposed to be doing with money. Okay. But how many different things can we point to at this point in time for you to go, maybe a 401 that I get when I'm 65 years old, and that's if the government lets me, and then they tax it. Maybe that's not a good investment vehicle. I don't know. Maybe having a savings account of liquid money all the time, 365, 24/7, no matter where you are, you can use your Bitcoin. That sounds good to me. It sounds much better than having 5 homes and hopefully you get some cash flow and hopefully there's not a recession and hopefully you can find a renter the entire time. And then, oh, you need some of the money. Then you have to sell a house or you have to refinance the house and then you have to go into debt for that much longer. We don't want to play cash flow games, guys. We're not traders. We're not bankers. Stop trying to be a real estate mogul. Save your money. Pick your property where you want to live for the rest of your life. Go buy it and then go save in Bitcoin because it's going to outperform everything else. Everything is going to zero against Bitcoin. So you might as well get your life in order now and just start stacking because Bitcoin is an ethos. And track me here, Nick, with this Bitcoin president and things like that. Bitcoin is an ethos where if you have a small business and you save in Bitcoin, you are going to thrive no matter what the economic conditions are of this country over the next 10 to 20 to 30 years. If you are a trader or somebody who's just kind of in it, you might get screwed. But if you're somebody who wants to build, let's say you want to build, and this will be my favorite one. Let's say I want to build a mini golf course and I can only get a profit in that mini golf course of $50,000, $70,000. Who knows? Who knows? It might not be that successful, but if I can make a little bit of profit and that profit mostly goes into Bitcoin, I can have the mini golf course. Now, if I want to have 5 homes and I got to leverage some of my Bitcoin and then shoot, Bitcoin goes out from underneath me for 6 months and then it comes back, you just got margin called. So everybody who builds with a low time preference that gives something to this great American economy that is coming, the circular economy, a much less global economy, a much more right here, right now economy, a lot of specialization in the States. If you can build a small business and back it with Bitcoin, you're going to have a business that you can keep in your family for the next 50 to 100 years. Chamath said it. Smart guy. If you think that Bitcoin is going to be a hedge for life over the next 50 years, start thinking about what business you want to start now and go change the world because Bitcoin is going to give you the ability to do that. As long as you can save a little in Bitcoin and you can pay for everything else that you need, go start your business now. The businesses that will survive are not the ones that you see today. The businesses that will survive are going to be run by small families, people that take a low time preference approach, people that don't go, the most important thing is growth. We got to grow. We got to grow. We got to grow. We're going to get on more debt. We're going to take on this debt. We're going to take on that debt. Oh, it's good debt. Don't worry because we're going to make more money on it. They're going to get screwed because at some point in time, Bitcoin will drop and they'll get margin called even if they have Bitcoin. Some of those people aren't going to have any Bitcoin. So God bless them. Good luck. I don't know what you're going to do with this currency and I don't know what you have been doing because every gain that you've made over the last 50 to 100 years has literally not been a gain against inflation. So you're just kind of getting even. If you build a small business and you back it with Bitcoin, you're going to have that business forever. And that's going to change what economics means in this country. We're not going to be a country of monopolies anymore. We're not going to be a country of fast food chains anymore. We're not going to be a country of big farming and big pharma and all this bullshit. We're just not because Bitcoin does not support these things. Bitcoin might support a few global players. There might be a few global players. But with the way Bitcoin works, I don't see how in the future we don't have a lot more small businesses that are able to stay in the family and around profitably for the next 50 to 100 years. It's a whole new ethos coming.
Talk about all those little crumbs that we may as Bitcoiners find and put together. You know, a meme that I think really puts the Bitcoiner perspective into perspective is this one right here. So if you're not watching, come see the video on YouTube and Spotify, but there's a house fire in the background that represents the global financial system. And there's a very nice fairway and a golfer in an orange shirt that represents the Bitcoiners, right? Everything around this global financial system is burning and falling apart around us. And what's hilarious is that most people don't know at all that it's happening. And on the contrary, they see it happening and they say, oh, well, you know, Putin, he did it. He's the bad guy, right? Not realizing that it's literally our own government that's creating all of these problems. And you know what the answer is? It's Christ and Bitcoin. In a financial sense, in this world, if you don't have Bitcoin, you will be caught in the house fire. You're left in the house fire. You're in the house fire, and there's a big, bright orange light that you can walk toward, go accumulate your Bitcoin, DCA, to Griff's point, and you will literally exit the burning house fire. That's all you got to do. Just exit the burning house fire. But most people, and again, this goes back to the narratives, these folks at the top have done a really, really good job. Credit to these folks. They have done a killer job of propagandizing the people and making them believe that the core root problems are racial issues and abortion and all this bullshit. If that's not the problem. The problem is that we are printing money, we're spending on larger and larger and larger deficits, and that is creating short-term approaches to life, which is creating bad long-term outcomes. And we're just now at the beginning of seeing some of these long-term outcomes that have been in the works for the last 50, 60, 70 years of bad money, of centrally controlled money that's being inflated away. We're just now starting to see the consequences of those actions rear its ugly head, and it is not good. And the question is, what do we do? All we got to do is simply DCA into Bitcoin with the financial capital that we have in excess that we don't need. Now, that for us, that's great, right? We run a balanced budget in our homes, Griff, you and I, and we're able to buy Bitcoin, right? I think it's maybe a little bit more of a difficult conversation with folks that are literally having to spend on deficit just to live, right? There's a lot of those folks out there that don't make that much money. Now, we could argue, okay, well, maybe their knowledge and their time is being allocated in a place that's not as valued in the market. Okay, we can have that conversation, right? I think it's a valid conversation. But at the end of the day, Bitcoin is our ability to float on top of the water. The dollar is a sinking ship. And the good news is that there's plenty of life rafts. The question is, are you going to be that person that's swimming up to try to get onto the life raft at the last second? Maybe there's just enough room for you to hold on to something. You're not even in the life raft because you waited so long that the few little dollars that you've got left only buy you 200, 300, 400 sats. Man, right now we can spend $1 and you can spend $1 and get 1,310 sats. Okay, now what happens I don't know what the timeline is, right? But at some point here in the future, probably a lot closer than we think, your dollar's only going to be able to buy you 1,000 sats and then 800 sats and then 500 sats. And now we're thinking about, man, the longer that we wait, the less opportunity we have in Bitcoin. Something that I think is really interesting, a good statement that we can really expand on big time is that Bitcoin has no top because the dollar has no bottom. Fiat has no bottom, meaning they can just print dollars at infinite amounts. And because of that, everything else that's harder to produce than the dollar, which is commodities, real estate, equities, Bitcoin, precious metals, all of these things will go up in price, not necessarily in value, but in price because we can print dollars infinitely. That's so bad. That is horrible. And what's bad about that is that further creates a disconnection between reality and perceived reality. Again, they spin up these narratives to make people think certain things and not necessarily how to think, right? People don't know how to think, they know what to think. And I think that that's a product of the narratives.
I think that it is at the point in time in this podcast where we ask people that are listening, subscribe, follow us on Twitter. We're not looking for ad money. We're not going to change nothing, no matter where the Bitcoin price goes. Nick and I are going to be here. We're going to keep doing the pod at Nyc and Griff Show on Twitter. We're on Fountain. We're on YouTube. We're on Spotify. We're everywhere. If you need it to listen to it, just talk to us. We will send you the link. At the end of the day, if you have listened to our message at all, we have stayed so consistent for a good chunk of time here. And we do feel like we have an opportunity to build a podcast that doesn't need to go to the models that have been in the past. No matter how big we get, we're going to stay the same. And we're just going to do it because we like doing it, because we like getting educated. We like steel manning each other's ideas. And we like talking about Bitcoin. We like talking about what Bitcoin can do for the world, because this isn't a Bitcoin only podcast. It is a Bitcoin only podcast. Crypto's for losers. But it is a podcast in which we talk about a lot of topics and we talk about a lot of stuff, and you're going to get to know us. And we're the type of people where we do a really good job of interacting on Twitter. So if you think anything we said was stupid, come bash us. We're not going to hate you for it. We don't hate people because they have different ideas than us. We don't hate you because of who you voted for. We like Bitcoin. We want you to have the ability to save money for you, your family, and then maybe you can help the world a little bit. We're not really here because we want to tell you that you're wrong or you're stupid. We're a little bit different than the Bitcoin ethos in that sense. But if you come here and you want to be intellectually dishonest, well, then we might prove you wrong. But we're going to hit ideas with ideas. We're not a low blow podcast. And I think it's a really good time for people to start subscribing, following, looking into what we're talking about. Because just a couple average sales guys, former college athletes, we got into Bitcoin because we were in an economics class that was talking about too big to fail. And it sounded really stupid because it is, in fact, really stupid. Nick, anything else?
No, you hit all the good stuff. Find all the links at nycandgriffshow.com. It's all spelled out, NYCandgriffshow.com. Go there. You'll find all of our links. We've got video on Spotify and YouTube, like Griff said, and audio on all the other platforms. But, man, fun conversation. Enjoyed this one. I'll see you next time, bro.
I'm bullish.